Hi everyone, welcome back to my top 500 games, and before I continue on with this list, I just want to say that there's a chance that in this episode we might cover a little bit more games than usual because there's a few coming up which I don't really have that much to say about because there isn't really that deep of a story behind them, but we'll see how it goes. Number 418 is Decap Attack. This is a Mega Drive game which I didn't have on the Mega Drive. I first played this on the Ultimate Mega Drive Collection on the PS3, and it's kind of like it's a platform game, but you get a skull and you throw the skull to attack enemies, and I really don't really know how much to say about this game. I do remember that it was compared to a certain brand of game such as Kid Cool and that something Fox game. I don't remember what it was called. Like a couple of specific platform games that follow a very specific type of control scheme. I'm probably talking nonsense to some people, but if you've seen the AVGN episode of Kid Cool, and I think Happy Console Gamer had a video about a game about a fox which was along the same lines. Apparently it's in that same vein, but honestly, to me it feels like it controls a lot better. Not amazing, but better. Number 417 is Kid Chameleon. This is another platform game, which yet again, I first played this game on the Sega Mega Drive collection on the PS3 because I didn't have it on the Mega Drive originally. So this is another platform game, but what's different about this game is that you can get different helmets which give you different power-ups that will allow you to do different things such as run up walls, and I did have quite a good time with this game. I didn't play it too much. After all, this isn't something that I had a lot of nostalgia with. It was one of those games I played, but it wasn't old. It was old enough to have fallen into that time whereby my experience of games would be limited, but I didn't play it during that time. So because of that, my experience of this game is pretty limited. But I did have a good time playing it. Sorry I can't say much else. Number 416 is Luxor 2. This is basically a Zoomer type game that was on the Xbox 360 Live Arcade. Apart from what made it different to Zoomer from what I can tell was that instead of being on the spot and turning around, you were actually on like a bar and you moved along the bar left and right. And one thing that I remember this game being infamous for was that it had achievements which gave you points that were not multiples of 5, and so that's why my gamer score as it stands ends in a 3 or something like that. I don't remember it. It doesn't end in a 5 or a 0, and this is the reason why, and people have an issue with that, but fine for me. I don't mind. I don't see the issue with that at all. Okay, now the next game I do have a bit of a story about, but I kind of already told it because this relates to a game that I mentioned earlier on, but I'm gonna talk about that story anyway, and that is Virtua Fighter 2, the Sega Saturn version, or rather the arcade version, because this is a game that basically, I'll tell the story again. When I was younger, my granddad used to take me out on Saturdays, not Wednesdays, on Saturdays. Wednesdays is school day. It was taken out on Saturdays, and sometimes we'd go to Hollywood Bowl and we'd go onto the arcade machines. And this is where I first really saw these big 3D games that seemed massive at the time and seemed amazing graphic-wise. And I remember Virtua Fighter 2 was one of these games, and that was one of the ones that I enjoyed the most of these games. But again, it's really hard to talk about because my experience of this game was primarily on an arcade machine. There are other games I played on arcade machines and then played later on, and we'll get to those games soon enough, but this is a game where my experience of it was all pretty much on the arcade machine. And if you remember the story from earlier when I was talking about Virtua Fighter 2 for the Mega Drive, I got that thinking, for some reason, thinking it would be as advanced as this one. Much better than Virtua Fighter 1. I mean, as if that's an achievement, but you know. But I've already gone through that story a couple of times. Actually, I should probably also mention that Virtua Fighter 2 on the arcade version had 2 extra characters that weren't on the Mega Drive version. I think one of them was called Lion, or it was either Lion or Leon, and then there was Shun, the old man. Number 414, again another game I have limited experience with, is Gravity Crash. This is another one of those PS3 download games that I got. Graphically, it seemed to have very much a sort of wireframe style to it. And also, the idea is you are the spaceship and you can fly and you can shoot your enemies and all that sort of stuff. But the main feature that stood out about this game, and the title is based off it as well, is the fact that gravity is a factor. So if you're flying upwards, obviously you're fighting against gravity, but if you're flying down, then you're going to go really fast. And if you're flying left, you're going to fall. So you kind of have to like fly at an angle and always accommodate for the gravity. I get the feeling that the gravity aspect of it was meant to be a big thing that people noticed, but it seems strange to think that it is because it doesn't seem like it should be, but it was, if you know what I mean. It's quite hard to describe. Number 413 is yet another game that I got on the PS3 downloads, again, another one of the early ones, and this is a game called The Last Guy. The reason I stopped playing this game is because I got to a level that I just couldn't progress. Basically, the way that it works is aliens have taken over the Earth, and you have to walk around, and you've got this top-down view, and you have to gather people. And when you walk around, these people follow you, and if the alien touches your string of people, they'll spread out, so you have to go back up to them and get them again. And you have to drop them off at the save points. So it kind of has that thing with like you have with Snake, whereby you collecting these characters, these people that you're saving, sort of increases your vulnerability zone, and you have to basically drop them off. But there's an element of speed to it, so you have to be so fast. So you can't just go get a few, save them, few, drop them off, few more, drop them off. You have to do it within a certain time limit. And I did just get to a point where I couldn't progress because it was too hard. That's the best way I can describe it. Number 412 is Fusion Frenzy 2. This is a game that was on the Xbox 360, and it was a multiplayer style arcadey type party game where you had different types of things that you could do, different types of events, different types of games that you could partake in. It was one of those, I suppose, very basic ideas that you can get a few people, have a little challenge, and it's just over and done with. And I do remember it was sort of presented like in a sort of game show type fashion, but I didn't play it so much as to really be able to give you lots of details on it. Number 411 is Gunstar Heroes, which is yet another Mega Drive game that I didn't play on the original Mega Drive, but originally it was later on either the Mega Drive collection or just a download game. I can't remember which of the two it was, but of these Mega Drive games that I didn't play originally on the Mega Drive, this was one of the ones that stood out to me the most, although I do feel like it gets a bit too much praise, but even still, I think it's a good game. What's interesting, I think this, again, is one of the big appeals to it, is that you can get different types of weapons and combine them to create a weapon that's kind of a mix of them both, or you could just get the same one, put it together twice, and so you have a sort of more powered up version of the same weapon. One of the weapons that I tended to use quite a lot was the double homing one, where you could literally just sort of like shoot and run, and the bullets would just go and kill all the enemies, which sounds like it's overpowered, but sometimes it didn't really do too much damage, I don't think, and so you would have to find better combinations. I also remember there was the flame and the homing one, where you shot a flame up, and the trajectory of the flame sort of changed its direction depending on where the enemies were. That was pretty nice. But I also remember there was one, I think the worst one from what I remember was one where you basically shot out a laser, but it was like this tiny little laser that appeared out in front of you. Maybe some players who are better at the game than I can explain as to why that's a good weapon or something, I don't know. But I remember that being not very good. But you could have two different control styles as well, whereby in one style you had more freedom over the movement of like your aim when you were shooting, and in the other control style you had more freedom over your movement because you could move when shooting as opposed to the other one, but because of that you couldn't aim as much. And it had some nice boss battles as well. Okay, moving on to number 410, and we have yet another Mega Drive game that I didn't play originally on the Mega Drive. What's going on here? This is a strange string of events here. But this game is Fatal Labyrinth, which is a roguelike game, and I know that some people really did not like this game, but I kind of got into it. Like, the idea is that you start the game again every time, and it's a rather traditional roguelike in that regards, where permadeath, randomly generated dungeons. You just got to see how far you can go, how well you can do in a particular run of the game, and you get items and everything sort of like randomly laid out. So you've got to just try and try again to see how far you can go. I don't think I ever got too far, but I did enjoy the whole hunger mechanic of having to try to stay well fed. So it was to stop you from just staying in one area and grinding over and over again, which I think is it's a typical roguelike type thing to do that. I remember for quite a while having a bit of trouble with the controls, but I got used to it eventually. Number 409 is Faxanadu. I didn't play this game as much as I originally wanted to, but I played this in 2009 because I was trying out older RPGs, and I originally played this game because I knew someone who told me that this was the first RPG that they had ever played. And RPG wise, in terms of leveling and stuff, it's very, very strange. It's basically all based on money. Like, you can kill enemies to get money that will allow you to get power-ups. It was sort of like, on a more basic fundamental level, the game is like a side-scrolling platform game where basic like sword attacks and all that sort of stuff. I remember one thing that really stood out about this game was that if you ran like in one direction for so long, you would speed up, and sometimes you'd need that to get across specific gaps. And I also remember that like the first town that you go to has like the death spell for loads of money that you just can't afford unless you did like masses and masses of grinding right at the start, which was quite unusual. But what was perhaps the most unusual thing about it, and I think this was a hardware limitation more than anything, was that because the game didn't save, you had passwords. Actually, yeah, it was passwords. I was just wondering to myself if it was passwords. It was passwords, yeah. But the game didn't really have too much to remember, because the way that it worked is that you got experience, and depending on what level you reached, you got a password set on your level. And what your level would determine is that the password that you would get it would make it so that your experience drops back down to however much it was when you became that level, and it would set up how much money you would have when you reload the game, when you put the password in. So you could get to a certain level, spend all your money, and then sort of reload and get that money back. It was quite unusual. Number 408 is a game that I feel is, for the series that it's in, I feel this game is so overrated, and it's Sonic CD. Now, I like the original Sonic games, but Sonic CD, I played this. Where did I originally play this? It might have been the Sonic Gems collection that was on the GameCube, which I didn't have, but my brother had it. And I think I eventually downloaded it on the PS3. And it's a Sonic game, so, it has good controls, it has all these things. It's an old Sonic game, one of the original 2D Sonic games. So it has the bare basics there, which is all good. But the issue that I had with Sonic CD was a few things. One, I didn't like the whole past, present, future thing. That seemed weird, and I didn't really understand what was going on. And I didn't like how sometimes I shot up into the air and then suddenly I would transport to another world. I couldn't really follow what was going on, and I didn't really feel like it was making any impact. But aside from that, the level design is just, I don't know, like, sometimes it was just as if the level wasn't designed at all. Like, you would have rings in walls that you just couldn't get to, and you'd have like areas of just bumpers all over the place. And I don't know, like I didn't really. I mean, I liked it just for the fact that it was a decent platform game with decent controls and everything, you know, like those Sonic games do. But at the same time, it just felt so hindered by all this really weird level design. And you had areas where you just kept bouncing back and forth, and it was really awkward to try to get out of that pattern. Yeah. Number 407 is Tekken Revolution. This is a free-to-play Tekken game that was out on the PS3, and it's got sort of like a free-to-play model where the way that it works is that you have these tokens that refresh over time and you can use them to play games online, or you can pay real money to get extra tokens so you can play more games more often. Now, of all the microtransactions, right, I hate microtransactions. I think that they're absolute worst. But I think these types of microtransactions are amongst the best type of microtransactions because what you are paying for is still the ability to play the game. You're not paying for power or anything like that. What you're paying for is the ability to play, and I can kind of support that. I'm not a fan of it, but I can get away with that, I suppose. But I do remember that this was like it was mostly just like an online game, and you played with people online. And there was the thing that I did like about this game was it had a leveling system, and I love leveling systems. You actually sort of were able to level up the characters like individually, but I remember there was a really weirdly skewed sort of system whereby you'd kind of want to power up one character, but it was really hard to just focus on one, so you had to kind of spread it out to get more points. I'm not really sure. It was quite strange, quite unusual in that regards, but also quite interesting because I think that would generally be better than being able to just power up one character over and over again. The downside, I think, to it was that it was purely online, which means you're going to come up against people who are just amazing at the game, and when it comes to competitive fighting games, I don't stand a chance. Yep, there were some games where I just spammed one attack, and there was one character who I played as. I don't remember his name. He was kind of like a martial arts type character. You press like one of the diagonals and then square and triangle. It wouldn't have been law. I don't think it would have been law. And there was like this weird, he did like this weird punch thing that was quite powerful. And sometimes I could get away with just spamming that and I'd win the fight. I know that means that people in the fighting game community would hate me, or obviously some people who are actually a lot better than me would be able to overcome that without issue because I'd be far too predictable. But it worked sometimes, and I did it. I mean, yeah, like I'm not good at competitive fighting games. I'll just say that. But anyway, I'm going to end this episode here. So thank you for watching, everyone. We'll continue with number 406 next time. We're actually almost finished the top. Well, not the top 100, the bottom 100 of this list, and then we'll be in the top 400. Huh. How exciting. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.